post-human scenario?
I'll tell you what it isn't, but it was a good guess. It isn't Star Wars. Remember Star Wars? I don't mean the battles of Star Wars. I mean that absolutely, there are two great movies were produced in the 70s. The great movie of the century was Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Why? Absolutely popular appeal. Why? Because the metaphors were so resonant. The metaphor of alien species speaking through sound, in that system, and also that mound, which of course is a very, very, very ancient metaphor of relationship to the cosmos. There are artificial mounds throughout Europe and America even, which have been built. So the idea of the guy in the story constantly building that mound, remember that thing, and the arrival, the interface to the world being on a mound, that was very potent. So Close Encounters was a very, very important movie for the myth of the time. But Star Wars was in one sense, and in one sense only, and that was the bar scenes in space, where you went in, where the protagonist goes into the bar, and along the bar are all kinds of biological developments, if you remember. There's kind of a sort of a lion type of kind of human kind of development. There's a kind of a dog, kind of a bird, kind of a human sort of entity. I thought that was a very significant kind of statement about, not of course that is how it will read out. I don't mean to say that we're going to cross with animals, but I am, not in that sort of rather trite and silly sense. But I do think that we are moving towards a situation where new kinds of species will develop. Already there's a debate intellectually. There's an academic debate. For example, Donna Haraway has supported this debate of the permeability of the identity of the human and the identity of the animal. They are permeable, and just as genders are much more permeable now. And so with this permeability of these biological species, after all, human beings wrote the story of species. Human beings labeled them. Human beings compartmentalized the differences. And as perhaps is quite well known, I don't know, Louis Borges, the South American writer, has written a wonderful story about dogs, in which they got classified in a totally different way. Not spaniel, but dogs who snap at your feet early in the morning, and dogs that litter the streets. There are other ways of carving up the universe, other categories. So, I mean, intellectually, that's taking place at the moment. That will result in new perceptions of how the world is and what species are, but also the post-biological developments in science will lead to greater permeability of these species. And so I think in that sense, the outcome, one can't foresee what it will be, but I certainly think hybridization, and I think that evolution, emergence of new forms, is to be expected.
It's a post-biological scenario and a post-human plan.
Well, I think then we already now are looking at the idea of the post-biological man, post-biological human being, in the sense, as I have said previously, that we are inextricably and always in a symbiotic relationship with the systems which constitute our environment. If that environment is technologically determined, then we are also technologically developed in relationship to it. We are bionic in that sense, both in terms of prostheses and systems that we interface with, and the actual genetic manipulation and restructuring, as it were, of the biomass and its development. But I can only see, what worth is prophecy, but as a narrative then, put it that way, but I think it has consequences back to what we're doing even now. I can only see that from that situation emerges a species, if we continue, because remember, species is a metaphor for our use. There are no human beings in the world. There are no trees in the world. There's whatever there is. There's no meta-language to describe it. We have invented words, and useful categories. Remember always that. I have to remind myself. But within that, I would think that human beings might encounter, as it were, somewhere in the future, a species which is post-human. I certainly don't think it will be some kind of whirring machine or sort of computer robot that has more intelligence and more skill and will treat us as children. I mean, there's a scenario we're familiar with here. I think, frankly, I find that absurd. I do think that nature, too, will continue to evolve. And in the chain of being, which we must remember always is a human conception, though. But if we will see the world in terms of a chain of being, then I would predict that this confluence of things that we're involved in now as active partners with nature, in this nature too, that from that will emerge a post-human species. In other words, a species which owes much of its initial being to the human condition, but which will evolve beyond that human condition.